9 parliamentary officials have been suspended in connection with the fire that gutted the National Assembly almost 2 years ago now. I should say more than a year ago, actually. The group is part of almost 30 officials who've been identified in an independent investigation into that blaze. None of the officials, though, have been criminally charged, at least not yet. However, Parliament says the investigation will continue. Let's continue with our reaction to the story now. Bring in the DA's MP Siviwe Gwarube, who joins us via our video link this morning. Great to have you on the program as always, Siviwe. Thanks very much indeed for making time. And I suppose it's worth starting by reminding our viewers what this probe actually found, at least insofar as the conditions of Parliament in the lead up to that fire. This probe actually found that there was minimum physical standards of security measures that were not adhered to, and that enabled this fire to actually take place. But there was also parameter issues that led to malfunctioning exits, a lack of monitoring that also took place there, the absence of on-site protection, and the list really does go on and on. We now know that 28 people were sent a number of questions by the investigating team to answer to allegations of their involvement. Do you know what the nature of these questions might have been?
Good morning, Ayanda and your team, and good morning to your viewers. No, we don't know what the questions were, and this is part of what we are going to be asking the Secretary of Parliament, that we obviously need to understand, as you had now clearly articulated, there was obviously all these breaches in Parliament, and some of them really egregious, and as basic as people, literally South African Police Service members, sleeping on the job and not even monitoring the CCTV cameras. So some of these things were obviously through the lack of maintenance, which in my view, that sits squarely on the leadership of Parliament. And then, of course, some of them were just simply negligence. The fact that there were not enough personnel on the ground, the fact that some of these policies were not in place, that we didn't meet minimum standards for even the building, which for me is a huge crime, considering the fact that this is literally the institution of Parliament. But nonetheless, the Secretary to Parliament has now said, look, they have, after we've been calling for this investigation, they have now identified that there would have been at least about 30 people who would be liable for some of these things. We don't know the nature of the investigation. We don't know some of the questions that were put to them. But what we do need to know now from the Secretary to Parliament is, number one, what processes were followed. Was this investigation independent? But also, more importantly, 9 of these people are senior managers and senior executive leadership, Ayanda. So we need to make sure that there's stability in this institution, because we cannot have a situation where we don't have literally the entire senior management of Parliament either suspended or even dismissed, if that's what it's going to lead to.
Yeah. You know, there's always been a view that there's a whole lot more to what happened than what meets the eye. I mean, as you and I speak, Zandile Mafe is the man standing trial for what's taken place there. But all kinds of questions have been asked, and there's been a whole lot of conjecture and speculation because of a lack of details around what the investigation even entails. What's the view of the DA about that, by the way? This idea that this was carried out by just one man who, at least we now understand, was homeless and maybe struggling psychologically, quite frankly.
Look, I mean, the extent of Zandile Mafe's involvement notwithstanding, the reality here is that Parliament was found wanting. How does an entire national key point lack such basic security measures? And so for me, I think we've got to accept that there are 3 levels of accountability. Number one, we've got to ask the serious questions from the Speaker and the NCOP Chair, who are the head of the institution, to say, well, there were clearly some security breaches, some basic maintenance issues. Number 2, we've also got to lay the blame on the leadership of the institution. And of course, we see now that this investigation is ongoing, and we've also got to ask the question from the South African Police Service, the Minister and his team, because remember, Parliament as the national key point is under the protection of the South African Police Service. And so, as you are absolutely right, there are multiple layers to this. So I definitely don't believe that our problems begin and end with one individual who's now standing trial. I'll think that this entire thing points to an institution that was not looked after, that was not maintained properly, and we've got to ask the questions. And I think it's going to be very, very important that while we are seeing the investigation being carried out now and these officials being suspended, I think it's going to be very important for us to not forget that ultimately the political responsibility rests with the Speaker and the NCOP chair of Parliament, of the NCOP. And so it's going to be important that we don't do this thing that we like to do in South Africa, where we scapegoat only officials and we don't see political accountability as well.
Yeah, speaking about bad habits from South Africans, so to speak, we also understand that these 9 people who are being suspended are going to be suspended with full pay and benefits. We've heard that before, haven't we? There's going to be obvious questions about how much time this investigation should reasonably be given, given the fact that these people are going to be paid while doing nothing, really, sitting at home.
Absolutely. That is absolutely important, Ayanda, that we, and this is why this week, the Secretary of Parliament must now level with members of Parliament as to what is the scope of the investigation, how long are these individuals going to be suspended for, and essentially what the rationale behind the suspension is. Is it to make sure that in the investigation you've removed them from the institution so that you are able to get your answers, and how long that is going to last? Because you'll recall, Parliament is notorious for this, where people would be suspended for 3 years until essentially their contract runs out. And we cannot have that situation, especially with 9 senior officials that essentially ensure the running of Parliament. We've got to make sure that the core business of Parliament is not affected by this, because ultimately, remember, that ours is to serve the people of South Africa. And so it is them that we also have to essentially keep in mind, especially as we head towards the end of the year. There are many bills that are yet to be processed, and these things have a direct impact on how South Africans live. Yeah,
the Parliament fire has also had a direct impact on MPs' ability to do their work. We've kind of found this workable solution, this hybrid sitting that's taking place there. But what's the sentiment, Siviwe, about actually restoring the building and ensuring that MPs are able to get back there? Is there any clarity around that?
Look, I mean, remember we had an allocation from the Minister of Finance last year of 2 billion rand for the rebuilding and refurbishment of Parliament. The leadership of Parliament has now outsourced the rebuilding to DBSA, and they've indicated that they intend to finish the refurbishment by 2025. And so really we are hoping that we're not going to see overruns of this project, that we're not going to see the escalation of costs, because again, a notorious South African tale of things, essentially costing double what they were initially meant to cost. So there's a massive push, particularly on our side, that we've got to get Parliament working again. We've got to get all 400 members of Parliament back at work, because it has suited a lot of members of Parliament who don't want to work to simply connect on the hybrid model and simply not show up in Parliament. It has suited a lot of the ministers who don't want to answer direct questions from members of Parliament. So we've got to get people back to Parliament. We've got to get them working again. And that's something that we are constantly monitoring and making sure, as I said, that there are no overruns and that there are no escalating costs that are now beyond the scope of what we were told. And 2025 is a lengthy time, but there's a view that, of course, now you've got to also see how you can modernize the building and, of course, make sure that something like this never happens again.
Absolutely. Loud and clear. Siviwe Gwarube, thanks very much indeed for giving us your reaction to the story. I appreciate your time on the AM report. Siviwe Gwarube, of course, is the Chief Whip of the DA in Parliament.